Shabbat Shalom. We humans are notoriously bad at prejudging situations. We're notoriously bad at prejudging situations. When I was preparing to enter the University of Michigan many, many years ago, I received a postcard in the mail telling me who my roommate was to be. I room blind, and so in East Quad, I got a postcard saying who my roommate was to be. And he's still a friend of mine, so I'll tell you that his name was Graham Garrett Grove, and he was from Bath, Michigan. And so I got this postcard about Graham Garrett Grove from Bath, Michigan, and I'll be honest with you, my anticipation was someone perhaps a little less educated. Even though we were heading to the University of Michigan, my assumption was that this might be some backwater young man with maybe a little, we'll just stop there, maybe a little bit backwater. Well, Graham Garrett Grove received a postcard in the mail saying that he was to room blind with a man named Starr from Troy, Michigan. And his anticipation upon reading the name was that he was going to be rooming with a 6'8", 250-pound athlete in both football and basketball. That was how he anticipated the situation. So it was on the first day of move-in that we both showed up. And I came across a young man, about 5'9", in the nicest, preppiest clothes you could ever imagine. Came to find out he was the son of two professors at Michigan State University, and he even had matching monogrammed towels, GGG, for Graham Garrett Grove. And you can imagine his surprise when he anticipated a 6'8", 250-pound athlete, and he opened the door to see a 5'7" future rabbi. We'll just leave it at that. Let's just say we both prejudged the situation pretty poorly. But even when we think that we can look someone in the eye and really get to know them, we humans are actually notoriously bad at judging other people on these first impressions. I'll remind you, in 1938, Neville Chamberlain, the Prime Minister of Britain, was a little nervous about this Adolf Hitler guy. So he flew to Germany and met with Hitler so that he could look him in the eye. And sure enough, Neville Chamberlain looked Hitler in the eye and judged him to be a pretty okay guy with limited desires and limited dreams. And so Neville Chamberlain left Germany thinking, this won't be too big of a situation. And we know what happened next with World War II. We humans are notoriously bad at judging situations, at judging people. And so it is that we turn to our Parsha this week, Parshat Shalach Lecha. And as I mentioned earlier, this is one of my favorite stories in the Torah. Here, Moses tells 12 scouts, leaders of the people Israel, to go scout the land. And they're to come back, to come up with a field report, and just to give some basic facts that Moshe is not only our rabbi, but is our general needs in order to prepare to enter the land of Israel and to conquer it. Our ancestors were only 2 years now into their journey out of Egypt and toward the promised land. And as we know, the 12 scouts came back after scouting the land of Israel. And not only did they give the detailed information that Moses was looking for, but 10 of the scouts went on to give their opinion and to say, we can't do it. We look like grasshoppers in our eyes. We can't do it. We're unable to conquer the land. Of course, we know that 2 others of the 12 stepped forward and said, we can. With great faith, we can accomplish anything. And those 2, of course, were Caleb and Joshua. But the people, our ancestors, were poor judges of character. They put their faith in these 10 scouts rather than the 2 scouts. And because they put their faith in those 10 scouts and their negative report, our people lost faith in God. They lost faith in themselves. They lost faith in their ability to go out and conquer the promised land. Even though God had brought them out of Egypt, out of 400 years of slavery, and brought them to the promised land, they didn't have faith that God could take them all the way in. They didn't have faith in themselves that they were able to do it. So murmurs spread, and eventually they rebelled against Moses. They rebelled against God yet again. And God determined that this generation, who could have listened to Caleb and Joshua, who could have put their faith in those 2 because they had their faith in God, but because they put their faith in these 10 scouts and their negative opinions, because they didn't have faith in God, Our ancestors were condemned to spend the next 38 years wandering, so that it was only a generation born in freedom who were able, some 40 years after the Exodus, to be able to enter the promised land. We are notoriously bad at judging situations. We are notoriously bad about putting our faith in the wrong people rather than in God himself. And so from this portion elsewhere, our rabbis come to teach us about the importance of two aspects of what we translate usually as faith. And I want to talk just for a moment about two Hebrew words, emunah and bitachon. Emunah, from which comes the same word amen, right? Aleph, mem, nun, amen. This idea of emunah is faith. Faith that there's a God, faith that God created the world, and faith that God, if you will, is master over all the universe. That's that word emunah, this sort of general faith that God is out there. But we also are told to have something called bitachon. You may know the word bitachon because in modern Hebrew, it actually means security. You may know the word bitachon, or at least the root of bitachon, from our Birkat HaMazon, where we quote the prophets, where we say, Baruch HaGever Asher Yiftach Ba'Adonai, right? Blessed is the person, Yiftach, who will trust in the Lord. Bitachon is this idea that God doesn't just rule over the entire universe, but that God actually can and does get involved in the lives of individuals. That sometimes God will make the heavens rain even just for a single blade of grass. That God is daily involved in our lives. So our rabbis come to teach us that our ancestors who came out of Egypt with God's outstretched arm were lacking in their emunah, their faith, but even more so in their bitachon, their idea, their faith, that their trust that God would act in their lives, in their day, and bring them to the promised land. We too, my friends, are lacking in that same bitachon. We often lack in God's ability to affect our lives directly. But strangely enough, we have no problem putting our faith in humans. We have no problem putting our trust in our human leaders. And that really is where our ancestors went wrong. They had a misbalance of trust between their lack of trust in God and their over-trusting in humans. Whereas we should have an overabundance of faith in God, but be a little skeptical of our trust in humans. Interestingly enough, our rabbis tell us with regard to our relationship with others, we should chabdehu v'chadshehu, right? We should honor individuals, but always have a little bit of suspect of them. Kavdehu v'chashdehu, the Talmud tells us in Masechet Derech Eretz. The Talmud tells us the story of Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Yoshua took this phrase seriously. Honor each and every person as if they are Rabban Gamliel, the great rabbi himself, but be a little skeptical about putting too much faith and trust into individuals. Sure enough, the story is told that Rabbi Joshua gets a message that there's someone coming through town who needs a place to stay. And Hachnasat Orchim, welcoming guests, is a mitzvah, especially in the ancient world where there weren't so many hotels and motels, right? There weren't bed and breakfasts, and there certainly wasn't Airbnb. And so Rabbi Joshua says, okay, I'll welcome this person into my home. And he puts him upstairs in the attic. Now, Rabbi Joshua took seriously this idea of kadvehu v'chashdehu, right? Honor someone, but suspect him. And so what did Rabbi Joshua do? He took the ladder that led from downstairs to the attic, and he removed it. And sure enough, overnight, the person that Rabbi Yoshua was hosting was a thief and went through and took all of the really expensive and valuable items in Rabbi Yoshua's attic. But lo and behold, there in the middle of the night, when this thief tried to sneak away, he took one step and then two steps out the door of the attic, but there was no ladder. So he fell with a thud, and Rabbi Yoshua was able to find out that this man was a thief trying to steal his things. Kavdehu v'chashdehu. Honor each and every person, but be a little bit skeptical of them. Now, there are limitations to this idea, because we humans can't function as a society if we're skeptical of everyone. And so our rabbis say, honor and trust the righteous among us. Honor and trust the teachers and even honor and trust the students of Torah. But everybody else maintain a certain degree of skepticism. Later on in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, or I guess earlier on in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, we actually read that we're supposed to give each and every person the benefit of the doubt. So how do we find this balance between trust but verify and give everyone the benefit of the doubt? And I think we see the best example actually in the ketubah. When those of us who are married had the blessing and the joy of starting our wedding day with the signing of the ketubah, the ancient wedding contract. It seems counterintuitive that one would start this great day of joy with the ketubah. Why? Because marriage is built on trust. Marriage is built on trust. And so the very first thing we're going to do is sign a contract. And here's the brilliance of the rabbis. They say we can best trust people when our obligations to each other are laid out in writing, and everyone has a clear sense of expectations of one to the other. And so marriage, that great institution built on trust, starts with a contract stipulating our obligations of one to the other. And thereafter, the marriage can go forth with great joy and blessing, and most of all, with trust. After all, this is what God sets out before us as well in the great contract that is the Torah, the great set of laws where God says, here are my expectations of you. And if you fulfill them, here's your reward. In this way, we can have incredible faith and trust in God. Not just emunah, faith that God is out there, but bitachon, that God is acting in our lives. When we heed the rules, God will grant us the reward. Friends, we're going to go forward into this world, and we need a lot of trust, and we need a lot of faith. But we're challenged to be very careful in whom we place our faith and our trust. Time and again, we humans give too much credit to other people, and we're taken advantage of. We are in our own day in the midst of a great challenge with this pandemic. Because right now, what our doctors and our healthcare advisors are telling us is all we have to do, not all. What we need to do is to wear masks and to stay physically separated. And in this way, we can really move forward as a society, by and large, pretty safe. Yet time and again, we're watching the news, we're entering the world, and we're seeing people who don't even have the courtesy to wear a mask or to keep physical distance. Right? The common courtesy of caring for others in this way. And so our trust is violated. And it continues to rub us the wrong way, if you will. It continues to bother us because we can't put our faith and our trust in others when they violate our health in this way. As we go forward, may we remember where to put the true balance of faith and trust. May the majority of our faith and trust be in the good Lord himself, be in the Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One. Blessed be God. And surely as we engage with our fellow humans, we should always give them the benefit of the doubt. But probably most of all, we should practice the words from Masechet Derech Eretz, Gadeu v'chashdehu, honor each and every person, but be a little bit skeptical about them. Adonai oz amo yitein, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. May God bless us with the strength and the wisdom to honor each and every person. May God bless us also with the wisdom to wear our masks, to keep our distance, and to honor each and every person in that way as well. Most of all, may God bless us with inner peace and outer peace. And let us say together, Amen.
Amen.